So what this would do is it would force homeschoolers, as soon as they take the government money, to then take tests aligned with Common Core.
You mentioned charter schools, and I want to go back to that in a minute. But before that, Israel Wayne was on the other day, and he said something that I had never thought about before, and I thought it was so interesting. I'd love to know your take on this. We were talking about colleges, and he was talking about how, a lot of homeschool kids going into the future may not be able to get into college, not because they're not prepared, but because the tests that are being required to get into colleges are becoming more and more, Common Core-ish. And our kids are not being taught that way at home. And so they're not going to be able to answer all of the questions that they haven't been taught to pass these entrance exams to get into the colleges that are just in turn going to teach them a bunch of garbage anyway. Not all colleges. I know that there are some good, solid, Bible teaching universities, but are you seeing that same trend happening with these kids who are trying to enter college, and what do you see in the future for that?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I love Israel Wayne. One of the most important books I ever read on education was his book, What Is God? Does God Have an Opinion on Education? And of course he does.
Yes.
It's very clearly expressed in the scriptures. But Israel Wayne is exactly right. And this is actually a problem that's affecting homeschoolers as well. Here in Florida, we had HB1. This was the top priority for the Republican leadership in a hardcore Republican state with a supermajority of Republicans. And what it would have done, it would have given large amounts of tax money to homeschoolers and to students in private schools. And in exchange, all they have to do is give up their freedom. They had to take a test that was aligned, and they give a few options of tests you can use. All of them are aligned with Common Core. So what this would do is it would force homeschoolers, as soon as they take the government money, to then take tests aligned with Common Core. We all know, and they all know, that testing drives the curriculum. Testing drives what's taught. So if your kid is going to have to take a Common Core aligned test at the end of the year, then you as a parent are going to have to teach him or her Common Core aligned material. So it's a very real risk. But what I would say about colleges right now, even the most elite universities in America, and I would never recommend that somebody send their child to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or any of these things. They used to be wonderful schools. They're total garbage now. But even these schools actually have active searches now across the country. They're desperate for homeschoolers. They know that homeschoolers are smarter, better behaved. They're not going to need a remedial education. They're going to go on to start huge companies. They're going to go on to be business leaders, political leaders. They know that if they want their endowments funded in the future, these are the kinds of kids that you want to go after. They see the same data we see. They know homeschoolers do better on everything. And so I wouldn't worry too much about that. One of the things I said earlier today, I taught for 12 years advanced economics to mostly homeschool students. The K through 12 school is primarily homeschool families. And what I always did, and I don't know that anybody else needs to do this, but what I always did was I always taught my children the truth. And then also, what you would have to answer on, say, an advanced placement test, or what you would have to answer on an SAT. Or different, tests that are backed by the government to get the question right. So I would teach them, the correct understanding of these issues. And then I would teach them the Keynesian view, the socialist view, so that if they take an AP placement test and the AP test says, what should the government do if there's a recession? Well, then they know to regurgitate, not because they believe it, but they know that's what the test makers want, that, well, then the government should increase spending and they should, reduce interest rates and things like that. So that's one thing that could be done. But honestly, I wouldn't send my kid to one of those types of colleges anyway. There are good colleges out there that aren't going to require this stuff, that aren't going to be teaching your children evil propaganda and trying to de-Christianize them. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, but it's definitely an issue. And it's going to be an issue for homeschoolers as governments increasingly offer big pots of money to homeschoolers who will agree to give up their freedom.
Yeah. And that's where conviction comes in, right? As we have to look at, what are we teaching our kids? And what next? And trusting the Lord with their future. Homeschool Insights is sponsored by CTC Math. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com and try it for free. For more great homeschool inspiration and resources, listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.